Deepti Galawan joins me on the set now to take a look at what the papers have been saying today. Hi, Deepti.
Hi, Jeannie.
We're going to start in Sudan, where month-long protests are continuing against the government.
That's right. It's what some papers are actually calling the biggest political crisis that the president, Omar al-Bashir, is facing in his 30-year rule. Protesters have been and are taking to the streets to express anger about the economic situation in the country, and also they're calling for an end to al-Bashir's rule. The embattled leader, who always wears a turban, as you see, is sort of sent up by this cartoonist from Al Arabi, a pan-Arab paper. Inside his turban, it's covered with pumped-up fists and the sticks of protesters. Another London-based paper, Al Arabi Al Jadid, says the president is actually on a visit to Qatar, really revealing how deep the crisis is, so much so to the point that he doesn't even know how to deal with it, and he's just sort of left the country while their police are firing tear gas on protesters, and more protests are continuing.
The Independent has an interesting article about how the West's approach towards uprising has actually changed.
Well, this is really interesting, and it's a really interesting piece from the Independent, well worth a read. The writer compares the current state of events in Sudan to the 2011 Arab Spring uprising, noting how dramatically the West's approach to the Middle East has changed in 8 years. Back then, the U.S. President Barack Obama openly called on the then Egyptian leader Hosni Mubarak to resign. 8 years on, there's no chance of Donald Trump making the same demands of Omar al-Bashir. In fact, the author really condemns the U.S. for sharing Arab regimes' quote, phobia towards any kind of street movements these days.
Half a world away, meanwhile, protests against the Venezuelan president, Nicolas Maduro, are engulfing that country today.
And dominating the front pages as well, Jeannie. The Venezuelan daily Últimas Noticias reports that the government is actually calling on its supporters to lead parallel rallies against what they call the enemies of the state, or terrorists. The Venezuelan government is also railing over the latest comments by U.S. Vice President Mike Pence, who's branded Maduro a dictator. He actually penned an article in the Wall Street Journal openly praising the courage of the National Assembly President Juan Guaido for spurring on these opposition protests in favor of freedom and democracy. It's interesting because we spoke just a little while ago about the U.S. not wanting to intervene at all in Sudan, but in this case, in today's Wall Street Journal, Mike Pence even goes as far as calling on Nicolas Maduro to step down.
Staying in the region, Deepti, the son of the new Brazilian president, Jair Bolsonaro, has found himself embroiled in a new scandal.
That's right, Flavio Bolsonaro. He's the eldest son of the Brazilian president. He's already been accused of corruption after financial authorities identified dozens of cash transfers worth thousands of dollars going into his account. Well, now O Globo, that's a Brazilian daily, they're reporting that Bolsonaro Jr. actually hired the wife of a gang leader, in fact, the suspected head of a Brazilian death squad, and he employed her for more than a decade. That gangster is actually on the run, according to police, and is believed to have been part of a killing group suspected of killing a councilwoman. Bolsonaro Jr. has condemned the claims as defamation, but it's not looking good for him or for his father, and that's what Folha de Sao Paulo, another Brazilian daily, is saying in this article, calling these claims explosive. They say, we could have imagined that the government would sooner or later find itself embroiled in controversy, but we never thought it would be embroiled in controversy so early on.
A lighter note now, Deepti, and a Mexican film is leading the pack of Oscar nominations that just came out.
That's by the Mexican director Alfonso Cuaron. The film is called Roma. It's a black and white period Mexican drama. It's received 10 nominations, Jeannie, including Best Actress nod for Yalitza Aparicio. She's an indigenous school teacher from Oaxaca who's now going to be attending the Oscars next month. Foreign, black and white, and on Netflix, Roma is already rewriting Oscars history even before if it does get any awards. On the flip side, though, the Academy is facing backlash for the noticeable absence of women in the Best Director category, despite what many say was a deep pool from which they could have and should have chosen.
All right, just to wrap up now, an article about the identity of an Italian soldier who inadvertently saved a young Ernest Hemingway.
That's right. So Ernest Hemingway was just a teenager when he was serving on the as a Red Cross volunteer on the Austro-Italian front lines during the First World War. He was actually distributing chocolates and cigarettes to the troops in the trenches when he was hit by mortar fire and badly wounded. An Italian soldier next to him bore the brunt of that attack. He died and in the process probably saved Hemingway's life. Unbeknownst to that Italian, who's now been identified as Fedele Temperini from Tuscany. His unwitting sacrifice gave us decades of literature from the great Ernest Hemingway. They managed to identify Temperini through a process of elimination, and a century on, finally giving a name to the hero who accidentally saved Ernest Hemingway.
Deepti, thank you so much for that. Deepti Galon with that look at the press review today. You can get a closer look, of course, on our website. The address, france24.com.